Viewers, the agenda-setting Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin's meeting is grabbing global eyeballs tonight. This high-octane meet is like never before, blending diplomacy, dosti and big deals from defense to energy. At around 7:20 p.m., when all eyes were glued to the TV screens, India rolled out a warm welcome for Putin, a reception loaded with symbolism, strength and statecraft. PM Modi hosted a private dinner meet for Russian President, marking the start of his 27-hour visit to India. This is the first visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin to India in 4 years, and his first since the Ukraine conflict began. For New Delhi, this visit comes at a time where the government is trying to maintain its strategic autonomy with Washington and rely on Moscow for critical defense supplies, crude oil and fertilizers. For Moscow, it's an opportunity to reaffirm a special and privileged strategic partnership with one of its most stable long-term partners and to establish new economic arrangements that circumvent sanctions and a fragmenting global order. Joining us to decode this very historic moment, while, of course, President Putin is in New Delhi, with us is former U.S. Ambassador to India, Tim Roemer is with us. Thank you so much for speaking to Times Now, Mr. Roemer. How are you looking at this moment where President Putin has touched down in New Delhi at this very crucial time, because he was engaged with negotiations with several top officials from the United States administration at the Kremlin just a few days back? And how is Washington going to view these growing ties or continuing ties between Moscow and New Delhi?
Well, I certainly think that there are going to be three major themes in these meetings between Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin. One is going to be geopolitical, one is going to be about oil, and one is going to be about defense and the future defense purchases that India has from Russia, given their legacy relationship with Russia. So let's talk about geopolitical issues first. Mr. Modi, I think, made a gracious gesture to greet Mr. Putin at the airport. I know he's done that with 5 or 6 other leaders that he's welcomed to Delhi from around the world. But once they get to the Hyderabad house tomorrow on Friday, they're going to have some difficult discussions to manage their way through. One will be about oil. At one point, India purchased about 2.5% of Russian oil. That got up to 36% of Russian oil. And now it's going back down, given Reliance and other companies deciding not to buy that oil, whether it's for their own reasons or sanctions. And that's going to be a point of, contention between the two. I'm sure Mr. Modi is going to try to think through, with these increased purchases of oil, how does India get more access to the Russian market and have a fair trade balance between the two countries? And how do they work through this relationship when Europe is not talking to Russia anymore, given the sanctions on oil and isolating Russia? That is something that, with strategic autonomy, Mr. Modi is going to try to work through and discuss. Secondly, on issues such as geopolitical issues, I'm sure they're going to talk about things such as China. China is Russia's no-limits partner. China has presented some problems for India, both on its border and in the Indo-Pacific, and with a skirmish on the border a few years back. That's a point of contention between India and Russia. And Russia, is in a point with providing equipment such as the S-400 to India, which I believe they purchased 3 systems in 2018. Only one of those systems has been delivered fully and on time. How do they get access through supply chains to the rest of this agreed to defense mechanism and safety procedure for India? And then they're going to talk about, issues on, the defense economy. how do they manage this relationship going forward? The U.S., as you know, is talking with India on a daily basis about new ideas on trade, AI, digital, new technologies, smartphones. How do the U.S. and the Indian economies mesh up with India having an 8% growth rate and with the U.S. and India trying to struggle through some economic tough times and some strain in the relationship? But on defense, on space, on education and healthcare, I think the U.S. and the India partnership, the strategic partnership is very firm and very strong.
No, I was actually going to come to that because you're someone who's played such a key role in managing ties between the two countries, having served here as ambassador. And, many see this as having hit a bit of a roadblock after President Trump imposed additional tariffs in response to India's continued purchase of Russian oil. Now, with President Putin here in Delhi, President Trump's directives, is there a sense that it's leading to some kind of a distancing between India and America? Because many analysts here see, for instance, the statements that have come in from individuals such as Peter Navarro as a lack of understanding of India's own geopolitical and strategic compulsions and the unique situation that India exists in that is, of course, not being perhaps acknowledged by Washington in the past.
Well, I certainly think there are strains in the relationship right now on the economic front. We are negotiating with India on a daily and weekly basis to try to arrive to a brand new economic arrangement and agreement, a bilateral trade agreement, hopefully by January of 2026. I think there are very positive signs indicating we might get there. First of all, the oil situation, Reliance is deciding to purchase less oil. That's been a point of contention between the U.S. and India. Secondly, the Bihar elections are over. Mr. Modi did very well there in that state. He's negotiating from a point of strength and where he can possibly negotiate tough with the United States, but also in a fair manner, maybe open up some areas with the U.S. Where we have not been able to get access to particular markets in the past. Thirdly, we are talking to India on a daily basis in different forums in the private sector on all kinds of new technologies, from smartphones to AI to digital issues. The U.S.-India relationship is moving toward the defining technology relationship in the world today going forward. I think we need to cool the rhetoric on both sides. So some of the rhetoric coming from the U.S. calling India a dead economy has not been helpful. That has been, in fact, harmful to us and far from accurate, by the way, from the Trump administration people. India's got the fastest growing major economy in the world today at 8%. Let's acknowledge that. Let's support that. Let's affirm that, and let's work with India on that.
Right. And it's not just President Putin, because we've seen in recent months there's been a bit of a strategic shift. And that was quite apparent when PM Modi shared the dais with Xi Jinping and President Putin. Do you think that this could perhaps in coming times bring a bigger challenge to President Trump?
I do think to criticize the Trump administration in one particular area, it would be to develop a overall strategic relationship and geopolitical strategy for the world. What we kind of see is a day-to-day back and forth with individual countries on tariffs, on Venezuela, on economic issues, and it latches and hinges and lurches back and forth rather than a grand strategy that is implemented over a 4-year time period, which would be the term of the Trump administration. It is not something that is helpful if rhetoric coming from the United States side at times pushes India toward a axis between China and Russia. And that's not in India's interest. That's not in the United States' interests. And again, I think there's a lot of attention right now on the one single pillar in the relationship, which is the economic relationship in the U.S.-India relationship. We are hopefully going to manage through that in the next several weeks. Once we do come to an agreement, I'm optimistic we might get there. You never know, but I think we'll get there. And then we highlight not only this new defining economic relationship between the two countries. Where do we go in technology? Where do we go on iPhones? Where do we go on AI? Where do we go on quantum computing in the future? We can't do that with China. We can't do that with Russia. India is our natural partner on a lot of the defining issues moving forward, on defense, on intel sharing, on space, underwater exploration, lots of areas that are brimming with possibilities between the United States and India.
Right. Also, given the recent attempts by U.S. to negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, do you believe that nations like India, which have strong ties with both sides, hold greater potential to facilitate some kind of a ceasefire, or at least enabling the talks?
I do, and I think Mr. Modi is in a particularly good spot, a sweet spot, as he walks this tightrope diplomatically and politically and economically to, continue to work through how India practices strategic autonomy. He's going to have some tough problems to work out with Mr. Putin. I just mentioned some of them: oil, defense equipment that doesn't work and is not delivered on time, access to the Russian market that is fair for India, lots of things that they have to, work through and, resolve at the end of the day. But, he's also in a position to have a quiet diplomatic conversation in a side room at Hyderabad House at some point, or at the dinner tonight, to say to Mr. Putin and to encourage him to come to some kind of an agreement with Ukraine and bring peace to that war-ravaged part of the world. We all want to see peace there. I think people in India want to see peace. I know Mr. Modi is a peacemaker. The Nobel Prize would go to him if he was able to pull this off.
No, of course, there's a lot in common. And as you rightly said, perhaps US and India, to that extent, the general perception is that they're natural partners. But there have been many hiccups. It's not just the rhetoric surrounding trade, the sudden imposition of 25 and then another 25, which led to 50% tariffs being imposed in India, which, there's a sense that this could really hurt sections of the industry, particularly those companies that were exporting largely or exclusively to the United States. But there's also the issue of the H-1B visa, which is a very important issue when it comes to ties between India and US, because of the kind of people-to-people contact and the kind of opportunities that it opens up. A lot of mixed messaging about the high fees, then the change in structures, who it would be applicable to. This has also led to some amount of consternation, because you have the Indian government, which has come out to say that when it comes to, talent and those who are educated and, have some kind of technical expertise, there should be a little more ease in terms of moving of that talented labor is concerned. But that doesn't seem to be quite the stance of the US government at the moment.
Well, if I were to critique the Trump administration on these two areas that you have just, articulately stated and brought up, I would say on the tariff issue, one proposal that the Trump administration should certainly consider would be to remove the 25% tariff that was hefted onto certain Indian goods back in August as a goodwill gesture from the United States to India. Remove that 25% and say we are making progress toward an agreement on trade. There are legitimate and genuine and productive conversations going on. We think we're going to get to an agreement at the end of the day. We're hopeful and optimistic. Let's take that 25% tariff away as a gesture of goodwill and confidence in our relationship. On the H-1B visas, the Trump administration, I think, has bungled this issue, initially announcing a $100,000 fee, then backtracking on that and saying, well, it won't be on existing H-1B visas, and backtracking even further on saying we're going to look at this deeper in a closer fashion and maybe revise it again. I think they rolled that out without thoroughly and thoughtfully and strategically looking at the consequences. And let me state this for, the kind of workers and skilled workforce that we get from India. There was a study done between Cal Berkeley and Duke University, I think back about 12 years ago. And they were very, very firm and very, very strong in stating that when Indian students in particular come to the United States and get masters and PhDs, they end up staying here and contributing and creating more jobs for our economy, not taking jobs away from people in America, but actually running companies, starting unicorn companies, and creating and spinning off more and more jobs. The technology in particular, about 23 to 24% of new American jobs and technology came from particularly Indian and some other immigrants coming from other countries and getting skilled positions and schooling in the United States. That's in our interest to enhance that, explain how that works well, and be very proud of the U.S.-India relationship and the people-to-people ties there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roemer, for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.
My pleasure. Always great to be with you in particular.
Thank you so much, sir.